Last week, Ontario laid out a path for reopening, but for myriad festivals and events that usually happen in this province, it was already too late. For some perspective on that, let's hear from three guests, and as is our custom, we'll introduce them from furthest away to closest to our studio, starting with, in Eden Mills, Ontario, just outside Guelph, David Radley. He's president of the Fergus Scottish Festival and Highland Games. At Exhibition Place on the waterfront of Ontario's capital city, Darrell Brown, executive director of the Canadian National Exhibition, and in the downtown core, Susy Hota, medical director of infection prevention and control and an infectious diseases specialist at the University Health Network. And Susy, it's great to have you on the program again, and to our other two guests, first time for you, and we're happy to welcome you. Darrell, let's start with you. Whose decision was it to cancel your festival?
It was the City of Toronto's.
And what did you think about the call?
Well, it's not that it was unexpected. We work very closely with the Toronto Board of Health every year for our event. So we were proceeding with our plans with some trepidation that there might be word that this would happen. And of course it did.
And well, I guess I'm allowed to ask you this. You don't have to answer it, but I certainly can ask it. Do you agree with the decision?
Well, let's put it this way. We had planned for multiple scenarios, including having an indoor-outdoor typical C&E or constructing various, let's say, population-limited, outdoor-only types of events. We believe as the year progresses, there's going to be an opportunity to have large events, but we also fully understand and appreciate what the city had to do. And I guess the other side of this is the further we go into planning, we spend massive amounts of money in front of the event. And if it doesn't happen, it just contributes more to our financial crisis.
Understood. David, how about to you? Who made the decision to cancel your festival this year?
We have a board of directors of 7 people who discussed it, listened to the medical experts, and we finally decided that we didn't see it happening. And like Darrell, if you start planning something like this and it doesn't go ahead, there's a lot of money goes to waste. So we very early on decided that with the way things were going, it didn't seem like we'd be able to have our normal 22,000 people all together. So we decided to go virtual again this year.
And I'm sure you don't like the decision, but at the end of the day, did you agree with it?
Oh yeah, I think so. You keep hearing that it's going to go, we're going to get better, but yes, I think it's the right decision. Much as I hate it for our competitors and patrons, I think the board is unanimous, and we decided that we just need to concentrate on doing a virtual this year and go big for next year.
Well, Twitter, as we know, is a font of all wisdom, and there's nothing but goods to know, he said with his tongue firmly implanted in his cheek. Having said that, somebody on Twitter did make this comment when they heard about the CNE being canceled this year. Here's what they tweeted. I try to be positive, but this just makes the spotlight on us as the most, quote, locked down city in North America even more embarrassing. New York City is opening up sans Broadway to 100% capacity by Canada Day, celebrations the city preemptively canceled weeks ago. Susy, let me get your expertise on this. Was there, in your judgment, no way at all to hold even a scaled down version of what are, after all, outdoor events?
I mean, I do think that sadly, the way that things have transpired over the last several months, it became more and more clear that we just weren't going to be in a position to have large mass gatherings into this early part of the summer and probably into the middle of the summer. This third wave of COVID-19 in Ontario has really been the worst that we've experienced so far. And, our vaccination kind of lagged behind some other areas, like parts of the US, where they were able to kind of go fast and furious and cover a lot of the population with first doses and even second doses quite rapidly. So, outdoor gatherings are safer. We know that. We encourage outdoor activities, but these are mass gatherings. They're huge, and they attract people from all over the world. So it's a different matter altogether.
So from an infectious diseases point of view, there was really, in your judgment, no way, even with, put all the caveats on there you want, scaled down numbers, no indoor events, there really was no way to do it safely?
Not with the way that we saw this wave transpire. I mean, we're still recovering from the third wave, and cases are coming down, but slowly. And we're also seeing different variants emerge through different parts of the world and trying to get a handle of that here in Ontario. So, I think we're just not quite there yet. And, like some of my other colleagues here on the show have said, let's just try to get through this safely this year and hope to plan for a greater event next year.
Let's just do a little background here and give our viewers and listeners a sense of what's at stake. Darrell, the Canadian National Exhibition goes back to 1879, for goodness sakes. How has it evolved over the years? Give us some of that background.
Well, we've always focused on a number of different activities straight up from 1879 onward. There's an agricultural section. We focus on industry and manufacturing, where a lot of innovation has been presented over the years, and there's also a general community benefit and arts sector. Many people may not realize that we had an art gallery from 1902 onward and actually contributed 340 artworks to the AGO in the mid-60s. So we were a strong supporter of the arts, and even had a government section that was featured in the fair for many, many years. So there was opportunity for the government to parlay its message over time. If you put it in perspective, even in 1920, when our population was a little bit under 9 million, 1.5 million people attended the fair. We've had over 250 million people attend in its history, and we even outdrew the Pan Am Games in 2015. So it's still a relevant event that evolves year to year and is still of great interest to the community, both in the GTA and outside of the GTA.
And of course, there's the Midway with all those great rides, and there's the concerts. You bring in artists every year to perform at the bandshell, and I know the Bulova Watchtower, the Bulova Clock Tower isn't there anymore, but it feels like it's a part of everybody's childhood if you grew up, in the province of Ontario, particularly if you grew up in the Toronto area. And I wonder if you could just talk for a second about the emotional loss, the traditional loss, all of that kind of aesthetic that Ontario will not experience this summer because of this.
Well, just to give an indication, we've had 14,000 people sign a petition over the last week and a half. It's savethecne.ca is the website that was put out by Mike Layton, but that gives an idea of the sentiment that's out there. The thing is, people work at the CNE when they're young. We hire about 5,000 young people every year, and so they take that with them. And there's a tradition of going with your family, with your grandparents, parents. When we look at the dichotomy of who attends, we cover the range in terms of income distribution. It's almost even for household income under $25,000 to people who are earning $100,000 to $200,000 a year, and we also cover all age groups almost equally in terms of distribution. So there's massive support for the event, and people just echo that this is not something they want to see lost.
Now, David, let's do the same thing for the Fergus Scottish Festival and Highland Games, which don't go back quite as far as the CNE, but they go back almost 8 decades, which is a long time. How has that evolved over the years?
Well, for those who don't know, Fergus is a pretty small town on the banks of the Grand River, just northeast of Guelph, and it was settled by Scottish immigrants. So the descendants of those Scottish immigrants, just after the Second World War, 1946, decided they should have some sort of celebration of their Scottish heritage. So they started the Fergus Highland Games, which has evolved to the Fergus Scottish Festival and Highland Games. So it's been running continuously since 1946. It features most of the things you expect to see in a normal Scottish festival: heavy events, pipes and drums, clans, and Highland dancing, along with a bunch of other things. It's been very successful, had its ups and downs through the years, but it's evolved to the point where it's become internationally known. We get an international patronage. We normally attract nothing like the CNE, but we normally attract around 22,000 people with our visitors and competitors each year. It is well known in the Scottish diaspora throughout the world now, and we enjoy putting it on with roughly 200 volunteers. It's fully volunteer based, and we're one of about 10 Scottish festivals in Ontario, and probably one of or the biggest of those.
And what kind of community feedback have you received so far to the fact that it's not going to happen this summer?
Well, obviously a lot of disappointment. I think most people, we get those that say we should go ahead, but most people understand. We get about 350 camping groups in every year. They obviously all look forward to it. The competitions for the pipes and drums and the heavies and the heritage and the Highland dance, obviously a lot of disappointed competitors who would love to get out there and strut their stuff, haven't had the chance. So locally, it obviously we affect the local economy quite drastically, and without it going ahead, that economic hit to the local community is difficult to take. So eventually, a lot of disappointment, but in most cases, a lot of acceptance.
I want to, well, let me put it this way. We will pick up on the economic impact of the cancellation of these two events in just a second, but I want to bring Susy Hota back in here just to talk about this. These are, I mean, the CNE is a massive event. The Fergus event is smaller, but still a significant number of people expected to attend, 20,000+ people. Do we need, in your view, in terms of infectious disease watch out, do we need to take a different approach to these big events, which have the potential to be super spreader events, versus smaller cultural events in smaller places that would attract smaller numbers? Do you think some of them could still go forward this summer?
Absolutely. I mean, size does matter in this situation. When you think about the number of contacts you could possibly have in a mass gathering where there can be 1 million people assembling from different parts of not just the country, but the world. Some of these are internationally renowned. That's a very different situation from a small local festival or market or what have you, where you can actually have better control over what people are doing and be able to design it in a way that's a little bit safer to keep physical distancing in place, to ensure masking's in place, to ensure it's set up in a way that actually allows for the flow of people so that you can enjoy yourself but still keep with some of the public health measures. So I think everything about this pandemic and how we consider reopening should be about gradual increments of change and keeping in mind, safety as it pertains to what the situation is in the month that we're in and what's happening epidemiologically.
Let me do a follow-up on that, Susy, because obviously if you're running the Canadian National Exhibition and 200,000 people show up in one day, you're not going to be taking people's phone numbers and handing out well, maybe you could hand out wipes to everybody who comes in, but some of the contact tracing measures would be difficult to do. Could you do that kind of thing with a smaller event?
It's possible. Again, contact tracing would be less concerning if there was an issue. I mean, you can contemplate how there are different additional measures that could be put into place, like, testing, rapid testing, ensuring that people are vaccinated. But all of these are difficult to implement. They have their own sort of ethical and, fairness challenges that are associated with them. And, I think it takes another layer of planning to do that kind of additional prevention measures. It's not something that we're used to doing with these festivals. So, I think that anything can be done with additional planning and with the timing, but the question is it worth going that route? And just how much will it help with the contact tracing and what we need to do at that particular time?
Well, events all over the province of Ontario not only obviously create memories and their wonderful traditions, not to be too crass about it, they sure help the bottom line of the province of Ontario as well. And I'm going to ask Tony Burke, who's directing today, to bring up these numbers, because how important are festivals and events to the province of Ontario? Well, they only contribute about $2.3 billion to the regional economy. They support more than 52,000 full-time jobs, and they generate more than $1 billion in taxes every year, in a normal year, of course. All right, Darrell, back to you. How much revenue in a typical year would the Canadian National Exhibition bring into the coffers of the capital city of this province?
Well, the economic impact to Toronto is around 93 million, to to the province, it's around 128 million. The earned revenue that we actually take in at the fair itself would be in the range of 35 to 36 million for the 18 days.
And we know that some people, under some circumstances, are still able. I was talking to Ellis Jacob, the head of Cineplex, the other day, who said even though all the movie theaters are closed across the country, they've figured out a way to still realize some revenue through rentals and so on. Is there any way for the X to make any money at all if the Princess Gates are closed?
Well, we're in a little bit of a different position than, let's say, the Calgary Stampede or the PNE. We don't own the grounds, and that's often a misconception. People think when they say the CNE that we have control of the facilities. We actually rent from the city, so there's no capacity for us, for example, to move the day to the CNE and still have access to the facilities that we need. It's 192 acres, multiple buildings, and we pay a substantial amount of money to use those facilities. So it's a real challenge if there's any change in terms of the dates or the arrangement between the city exhibition place and ourselves.
So with no 20-day fair this year, your revenue is essentially nothing?
We looked at a 96% drop in our revenue last year. We cut costs by 86%, but we have depleted. Going into 2020, we had about $7 million in our coffers. $1.5 million of that was actually prepayments from vendors and concessionaires for the next fair. So we had $5 million that we would use to sort of pre-fund the planning of the next event. And then as we're getting closer to the event, we start to accumulate revenue from vendors, concessionaires, and then of course ticketing and parking as we get into the event itself. All of that's lost. So we completely depleted our $5.5 million. It costs us just to run our association $5.5 million a year. So that was gone in year one. We negotiated loans with our bank, Scotiabank. So we're living on borrowed money now, but under the terms of that loan, we would have to repay by September of this year. So basically, we are completely out of funds and looking for a way to survive to next year.
Is the future of the X in doubt?
Absolutely, unless the government, various levels step in. Now, the mayor has voiced strong support, and one doesn't reasonably expect that the city would be handing out cash given its own circumstances in dealing with COVID. But what the city can do is we pay, for example, a little over $4 million for use of the 192 acres during that 18-day period. We also lease 3 buildings on site, so there can be arrangements there that the city can help with, and they've agreed to help in that regard. But we need about $11 million to really get us to next year, and we've been talking with the federal government and provincial government really since the onset of the first wave, and trying to get support, and are still looking for that. Right now, the commitment we usually receive is $5,000 from the provincial government through AMAFRA, the Ministry of Agriculture, and that's it. We earn our own keep usually.
You get $5,000 a year from the province of Ontario.
That's it, yeah. And when you compare it to, for example, what Minister MacLeod calls the Big 8 cultural institutions, and I'm in no way suggesting that they shouldn't be receiving funding, but like ROM, AGO, and the like, they receive in aggregate over almost $102 million in regular funding, and they've received $27 million in COVID relief funding already. But nothing so far in terms of, there's been a small business relief of about $20,000 that came from the province. But we've obviously taken advantage of the wage subsidy program federally and the rent subsidy program, but we need targeted assistance.
David, the Highland Games, how important to the local economy are they?
Well, different scale to Darrell, obviously. We contribute about $4 million to the local tourist economy each year. On top of that, we involve a lot of local community groups and businesses to set up the festival. So between $3.5 and $4.5 million of effect to the local economy.
And is the future of the Games in any doubt as a result of having to shut them down this year?
No, we ran into some really hard times back in about a decade ago, and we worked very hard to ensure that should we have a problem, we could ride it. Unlike Darrell, we've been very lucky. The governments have come forward with to a lot of our smaller festivals and subsidized to some degree. We had what we call our rain uh, fund. We figure that about every 4 to 4.5 years we get rained out, so we better have some money in the bank to look after it. So all in all, we will weather this. We our bank account will be way down, but we feel that we can afford to put things on next year. Um, and hopefully we'll get the revenue coming. Our revenue comes from three sources, obviously, mainly from ticket sales. We get some government grants, and we have a lot of very loyal local sponsors that sponsor us each year, either with monetary donations or in-kind help with setting up the festival. So we're not in danger. I know a lot of the other festivals, local Scottish festivals, are as a result of not being as large or as well funded as we are this year, but we're looking good.
Susy Hota, we saw the other day that the province of Ontario has now set in motion what the three stages are for the reopening of the province and certain benchmarks that have to be hit in order for those stages to kick in. And I guess I would sort of put the same thing to you. It's obviously too late for these two events, but for other events looking at we have to be under X number of positive cases. We have to have X% of the population with at least one vaccine. We need at least X% of the population with 2 shots. Can you give some advice to everybody watching this right now who may want to know if their festival can go forward, what targets you think need to be hit before they can?
That's a really difficult thing to do, to actually pin down numbers that are going to be across the board, kind of the thresholds that we use. And that's why there's been such a struggle to even get to that point now, because the other thing that you have to keep in mind is, the rate of increase of cases varies according to what variants start to take over and what their transmissibility potential is. So, I think that we need to see stability in the numbers, not just a decrease in the numbers and hitting, a threshold, but stability, that we've kind of bottomed out at that number, at least for a short period of time. I do think it's really important to think not just about first dose coverage, but also second dose coverage with these vaccines, which really does give you better protection, more reliable protection for a longer period of time. And I'd like to see younger age groups also vaccinated, not just looking at, percent coverage of adults. So, there are many things to think about that have to do with, those same thresholds that we've heard about with the reopening plan. Trying to pin down the numbers is a bit of a difficult task, as I've mentioned, for all those reasons.
No, I appreciate that. But, for example, people may remember a year ago, we were down to basically 200 positive test cases a day. We're a long way from that right now. I think last week's rolling average was somewhere between 2,000 and 2,500. So when you say we need stability, in roughly what neighborhood?
Just looking at less than 1,000 cases per day in the province, to me, still seems very high. I think we need to be aiming somewhere in the hundreds. Below 500 cases a day, I would say, would be very positive in terms of thinking about what we can open up incrementally, in terms of festivals, gatherings, things like that. But, with every change, we've got to give it time as well to see that it's not going to have a big impact on what the overall cases are doing. And to me, an important indicator too that we haven't really talked about is what's happening in the healthcare system and how can we cope. We're going to have COVID-19 with us, longer term, perhaps forever. And if we can prevent the harms from infection, that's the most important indicator. If our healthcare system can cope with managing the incremental, requirements for care that COVID-19 has brought, that's important. Then we can get on with the rest of our lives.
Susy, I should ask you a question while I've got you here about something that has nothing to do with the province of Ontario, but it is going to be kind of the biggest event in the world taking place not too long from now, and that's the Summer Olympics. They're still scheduled to take place. In your view, does it make sense to go ahead with those games right now?
I feel very uneasy with that thought. That's truly bringing international populations together in large mass gatherings, with athletes and the Olympic Village where the athletes are staying, as well as a high risk kind of setting. It worries me quite a bit, especially as we're hearing about different variants emerging, and our ability to track some of those variants and know exactly what they're doing and what impact they have on people who get infected with them is still really quite limited, especially in different parts of the world. So, I'm not in agreement with that decision. Of course, it's not my decision. There are many other factors to consider beyond the epidemiology and what those risks are, but it does worry me quite a bit.
Well, it sounds like the biggest decision is money. I mean, the Olympic Games just make a fortune, so hard to turn the taps off. Anyway, I throw that out there as a hypothetical, and you can comment or not as you like. Over to you.
I mean, the way I see it is the economy, of course, is really important. And I still think that there are ways that we can creatively think of how to recover the economic losses of some of these large events. What we can't do is replace the people who are going to die as a result of, reopening some of these large gatherings too quickly. So that's the way I see it. It's pain in the short term in order to have gain in the long term.
Darrell, let me give the last word to you, and that is, I presume at some point, now that this year is a write-off, you have to start thinking about next summer. At what point do you do that, and at what point do you think, here's what we need to get it going?
Well, I think people underappreciate the level of effort it takes to put on as diverse a show as the CNE. We work year round on planning, and in fact, even when we've planned a given CNE, there's some things we're looking at for the next year. So we would be looking at what is possible and how we could negotiate contracts from now going forward for the next season. Of course, the real dilemma for us is how do we do that when we've had to lay off the bulk of our staff? We're working with a skeleton crew now and still trying to search for that financing to get us to where we can go. But we have a significant international component. Speaking of people coming from other countries, we have an international stage of the 6 or 7 stages we usually put on. That takes a great deal of pre-planning to get people in the door. And of course, we also have an international pavilion where we bring in vendors from overseas. So there's lots of issues there because of the travel restrictions and what people can and cannot do, when they can apply for visas, and all of those kinds of constraints that we face as well. So there's a myriad of issues, and we're hoping that we get buy-in. If one does a cost-benefit analysis, we've talked about the economic impact. I think $11 million for a $128 million or more payoff, and 1,000 performers or entertainers being hired, over 700 businesses operating and earning revenue in the fair. It makes economic sense to continue this thing going and get the support we need to move forward.
That's Darrell Brown, Executive Director of the Canadian National Exhibition, making his case for the future of the CNE. David Radley from the Fergus Scottish Festival and Highland Games. Susy Hota, University Health Network. It's great to have all three of you on TVO tonight. Stay safe, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.